This is Capsule, and we're going to talk about the tax reform, which was approved yesterday in the Senate, right? I made a video, I recorded the video before it was approved, but I didn't even have to change the video, because in the video, I said that it was going to be approved by the Senate. It was surprising, because they approved it with 54 votes. In other words, 5 votes short of 5 votes. It wasn't approved in the Senate. Unfortunately, what I said was approved. The people have managed to include all the senators' wishes in the proposal, which won't solve anything because it will go back to the chamber. They're going to take away everything the senators asked for. So I don't know where the senators saw the advantage of having their requests met there. But anyway, the most impressive thing about this story is that one thing has become very clear. Bolsonaro is against this reform. The PT people, Miriam Leitão, the left-wing people, you see Bolsonaro is against the reform and so on. It's a deal that's going to modernize Brazil and all that. So I want to make it clear, I was also against it, by the way. Even before Bolsonaro spoke out, I said that I was against this tax reform. I'm against tax reform by definition. So let's be clear. I'm against this reform. I was against it. Bolsonaro was against it. Let's see in the future what the outcome of this reform will be. This news was suggested by Thais Banjando. It wasn't Picanha, it was Calango and several other people. Thanks to you who are watching our video. If you like our content, please. So, the tax reform has been approved. We don't have the final text yet because it was approved in the House in 2 votes. It's a PEC that has to be approved in the House in 2 votes. In the Senate in 2 votes. And if there are any changes in the Senate, it goes back to the House, and now the House has to approve it again in 2 votes as well. And what's more, the House can change what the Senate has done, and what the House changes is now enacted, because now the Senate doesn't say anything. In other words, the Senate got screwed on this one, because what they changed, they made a lot of agreements, a lot of negotiations with the senators, not to give benefits to this industry here, to give benefits to this industry here. I don't know what they put a bunch of hangers on in the damn reform. Now it's going back to the chamber. The most likely thing is that they'll take everything out of there anyway, and they're going to approve this PEC, right? It's very bad. It's not immediate. This reform will start operating in 2027 and won't finish until 2033. But the result everyone knows is the greatest you can send in the world. The Brazilian tax system is extremely complex. He has never had a problem saying that the Brazilian tax system is absurd. But tax reform in Brazil is insanity. It just doesn't work. Because you start to have a lot of pressure groups in the Senate. That's exactly what I said. A lot of pressure groups started pushing, not because the automakers want a discount here and I don't know what there, they want a discount there and I don't know what there, they want to change that, I don't know what there. Oh, the interests of a lot of people were preserved in this deal in the Senate. Guess who wasn't there in the Senate lobbying to preserve his side? That's right, you, me, us, the general public. The result of all this, we're going to have the biggest VAT in the world shoved up our asses, and above all, the service sector, which is the sector that employs the most people in Brazil, will pay the most. Most of the people who are economically occupied in Brazil work in the service sector, ranging from education, commerce, consultancy, offices, law, you name it. Because in a way I also work in the service sector, disseminating information here. In the end, we're going to pay a lot of money for this story, right? Anyway, it's been approved. Now there's nothing more to do. Congratulations to Lula. Congratulations to PT. You managed to break Brazil, right? Look here at Estadão. Bolsonaro sends message to try to frustrate the vote in the Senate. That message was changed. They altered it. The previous message was Bolsonaro tries to sabotage the vote in the Senate. Come on, don't these people know the concept of opposition? Opposition works like this. Bolsonaro has made it clear that he is against this project, right? And then there are people here saying that no, Bolsonaro is doing opposition for opposition's sake because he's not thinking about the country. No, man, this project is terrible. The whole tax reform is terrible. We have to bury this business. It's absurd. It's good that Bolsonaro tried and almost succeeded. His effort to talk to the people turned into 2 votes. If it had at least won the PL's allegiance, this thing would have been stopped, you know? If the PL senators had voted as Bolsonaro indicated, this process would not have passed. What a sad situation, right? Anyway, I don't see a problem here. I mean, there will be problems, but we imagined that the Lula government was going to be such a tragedy. The whole problem, which I think has to be made very clear, is who was for and who was against this reform, right? Because that's going to show up in the future. It's going to show up in the future how absurd this tax reform is, isn't it? Here it was Senator Nelson Trad who received a message from Bolsonaro asking him not to vote and so on. And he said no, that he'd made a commitment, that he'd gotten benefits for his place, for the Midwest, I don't know what. That's the people's view, you see. Oh no, but I got benefits here in my state, I got benefits for my city, I don't know what, so that's it. So let's vote. The stupidity of these people, man. The tax is going to apply to the whole of Brazil. So you got an advantage for your city. They're still going to get screwed because other cities and other states have gotten an advantage too. So everyone is going to get screwed along with the tax. This kind of thing is absurd, this short-term thinking on the part of the Senate. Why do they like it? It's what I said. It's not just the president who likes to have more money stolen from the population. The senators and deputies like it too. They're going to have another mountain of money for them to spend on little populist works, on bullshit. Look at what a scumbag Jandira Fegali is. Bolsonaro against Brazil. Bolsonaro called the senators and asked them to vote against the tax reform. Yes, that's called opposition. It's exactly the opposition, isn't it? Bolsonaro is against tax cuts. Boy, what hypocrisy. Bolsonaro reduced taxes a lot in his government. He doesn't want this tax reform because it increases taxes. It doesn't reduce any tax. What kind of tax reduction is that? Yes, the PT people get all upset that I don't know what, that it's time to account to the courts and so on. It's more like you, Jandira, to have to answer to the courts than Bolsonaro, isn't it? Carol de Tonho is saying here that the tax cut is going to be 27.5% of VAT. Man, it's almost 33%. Almost a third of everything you buy, a third goes to the government. It's complete nonsense here. It's the biggest. No country in the world, not even those countries that offer products and services, high-quality public services in Europe, none of them steals as much money from the population as the Brazilian state with this upcoming reform. It's a complete tragedy. There's no salvation in that. There's no way of slowing it down. It's going to be a tragedy. It's going to happen little by little. Will the frog jump out of the hot water, or will it be cooked little by little and you won't even notice? Anyway, in the end, Bolsonaro recognized we lost, right? All hail our Brazil and all that. Mateus Leitão is celebrating Bolsonaro's big defeat on tax reform here. What a defeat for Bolsonaro. What a defeat for Brazil. What a defeat for all of us. What a defeat for you too, journalists, who will have to pay the highest VAT in the world, right? The president decided to be leader of the opposition for the opposition's sake. Why? Just because you agree with the tax reform, do you think he should too? No, he made it clear that it was bad, and it really is bad. This reform is a mess. He went in wholeheartedly. It's good that he did it. Someone did it. We have politicians in Brazil to oppose this kind of lasciviousness on the part of the Lula government, but he didn't succeed. Former Chief of Staff Círio Nogueira, I also think that I should have gotten this right. I also think that these people are fucking traitors. But what can you do? Bolsonaro tried, he did what he could to try and stop this kind of thing. A lot of people are already saying that the situation is complicated, and Philip Salto is talking about the ugly system. Mostrengo tributário. He's saying that's the problem. The problem is that nobody really questions the fact that the central disagreement does not lie in the diagnosis. The current system is too complex, generates economic inefficiencies, and is regressive. The poorest pay more than the top, especially when it comes to consumption. The whole question is, okay, how do we solve it? This reform is a mess. Any tax reform in a Congress like the current one, divided and all, might generate this kind of thing. It's a bunch of concessions for groups that have lobbying power in Brasilia. The people who are going to put pressure on Brasilia, the people who have lobbyists there, are going to do well, right? That's for sure. There's a lot of industry there that will do well. Do you know what you won't get if you don't do well? Who doesn't have a lobbyist in Brasilia? I don't. Do you? I don't have the money to do that, do I? In other words, we're going to get fucked. And again, what happens with this tax reform business? If you simplify the tax, there will always be some federal entity that will earn less, either a state or a municipality. this federal entity will cling on tooth and nail. No, you can't reduce my revenue, you have to maintain it, and so on. The federal entity that gains the most from the reform, that collects the most from the reform, doesn't care. But the one who raises the least will fight hard. The result of this story is that reform inevitably ends in a tax increase. And inevitably, the current system is terrible. Leave it alone, leave it the way it is. It's less worse in the end, right? I think this guy here has been watching my videos because he talks here, lifting the burden on those who don't have the power to lobby. Exactly. Anyone who doesn't lobby, who doesn't go to Brasilia, who doesn't hire a politician to lobby, ends up getting screwed. There are people saying that the rate estimated by us at Warren is 33.5%. Not to mention the cost of the PEC funds, because they set up a lot of funds to help the state and municipalities. It's going to be a tragedy, a complete mess from here. I just want to see, so let's be very clear, I was against it, Bolsonaro was against it, let's see who's right. People on the left were in favor. Let's see who's right in this story. Thank you for watching the video to the end. As well as liking, sharing, and subscribing to the channel, consider becoming a sponsor with prices starting at $19.99. Click on the Become a Member button below to find out about the conditions and advantages of sponsoring the channel. For more information about our project, visit our websites listed on the screen.